Thank you very much for joining us. Ismail is the legal officer at the Constitutional Programs team at the Foundation. And Ismail, one of the concerns you raised in your presentation was the Employment Equity Act Amendment Bill and proposed regulations that have been tabled to be made in terms of this bill that would set forth specific targets for industries and so forth. And in your view, this law would aggravate racial discrimination, it would aggravate racial disparities in the workplace. Rather than solve equality or further equality, it would promote inequality.
Right.
Now, perhaps you can tell us a bit more about this, as well as what, in your view, the proposed solutions would rather be to this. So instead of going for a race-based law such as the Employment Equity Act and regulations made in terms of how could we actually further achieve equality based in the workplace?
Right. Well, thank you, Daniela. Now, the Employment Equity Amendment Act of 2023 and regulations made in terms of it risks perpetuating racial inequalities in South Africa by unfairly discriminating against South Africans. Now, critics of the Employment Equity Act argue that while this bill has some noble intentions, it perpetuates racial inequalities and thus impedes social cohesion and economic growth.
Obviously, because if you're going to tell people that, look, I'm looking at you as an employee based on the color of your skin, that's not going to further social cohesion at all.
Absolutely. And while the Employment Equity Act aims to promote workplace equality, its designation of designated employers and the power it gives to the minister to establish numerical sectoral targets for certain employment sectors does just that, risks perpetuating those inequalities. Now, for example, the draft Employment Equity Regulations, gazetted for public comment in May 2023, what that does is it basically sets quotas or targets for certain racial minority groups. For example, you might have a 0.0% target or 0.1% target for brown or Indian individuals in specific provinces. What this does, it's deeply concerning because it hinders these individuals' opportunity to access the job market. And in so doing, not only racially discriminates against these individuals, but really hinders workplace diversity.
No, I mean, that's very, very concerning. If you're talking about zero percentages that you were naming there and just above. Because, I mean, South Africa is supposed to be a country that is founded on non-racialism. Non-racialism is one of the core founding values of our constitution and of the republic. And yet, in an attempt to achieve substantive equality, we see race-based legislation like this, which in your argument would make inequality even worse. So what would some of the alternative solutions be? We all want to see equality, we all want to see substantive equality achieved. And we want to see South Africa be a non-racial society where we don't look at each other based on the amount of melanin we have on our skin.
Right.
So what would some of the solutions be that you think, rather than the Employment Equity Act and the proposed regulations that you mentioned, what are some alternatives?
Right, absolutely. While, as you mentioned, we do recognize the fact that we need an open, democratic, non-racial economy, I believe, and I think the Foundation does too, that this is not the way to go about it, as this would not achieve the type of substantive equality envisaged by the Constitution. Now, it is still unclear what kind of agreement there was between the government and Solidarity in June 2023.
Because they had that settlement agreement after Solidarity brought a case in front of the International Labour Organization.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Solidarity brought a case before the International Labour Organization where it was stated that neither the government nor companies may use race as a tool to discriminate against who it can promote or hire or fire. And I think that that was a starting point, but we need to focus on what the Constitution says, promoting equality, but remembering that the criteria to that is that substantive equality needs to be upheld and maintained.
Exactly, and that actually for a law to meet substantive equality, it actually needs to meet some criteria as well.
I think that this specific act, the Employment Equity Act, does not do that. It does not meet the criteria for substantive equality, and therefore it could be considered as unconstitutional.
Yes, because it's actually undermining the long-term project of a non-racial society.
Absolutely. And in the conference, we spoke about progressive and regressive laws. Well, I believe this is just one instance of regressive laws that will take us back into the dark days from whence we came, rather than take us into the future envisaged by the Constitution.
Yeah, and exactly. And like you say, we all want substantive equality and we want an open economy. And let's face it, none of us want to be looked at based on the amount of pigmentation we have on our skin. We're much more than that.
Right.
But if there are laws that are trying to achieve substantive equality, they actually need to abide and meet those three values. So they actually need to practically help the people they're intended to help.
Right.
They need to be reasonably capable of achieving that. And they need to not harm the long-term project of equality.
Absolutely.
And non-racialism, yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you, Ismail, for your time.
Thank you, Daniela.